All right, welcome everyone. Thank you. That took a little while to let everybody in from the lobby, so appreciate your patience. Thank you for joining us. My name is Terry Martin. I am the Chief Geospatial Information Officer here at NAPSG Foundation. I'm excited to kick off our next Prep Tech Talk, Hurricane Season Prep, synchronizing GIS resources and response across the community. We are fortunate to have an amazing slate of speakers here today to share some resources and best practices that will help us work better together as a community this upcoming season. So just a quick note on some logistics. Please add your questions to the Q&A throughout the webinar. Speakers will try to address them when not presenting. If there's any time left over, we will go through what we can at the end. But no worries, if not, all materials, including the Q&A from the webinar, will be available in the coming days. So if you registered, you'll get an email notification. Otherwise, if you will check our events page, they'll be loaded there as well. You can also grab live links as they appear on your screen. You'll see that the chat feature has been disabled. But if you miss the links, again, those will be available in the webinar materials as well. So we have a very full agenda, so I'm going to kind of jump right in. After I wrap up the introduction, we will have presentations on resources from the folks listed here from several of our federal partners, followed by a few of our state partners who will be sharing some best practices and lessons learned from recent events. And finally, we always love to give you homework, so we will end with a few recommended to-do items at the end to help you prepare. So briefly, for anyone who may not be familiar with NAPSG, we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We have a national network of over 20,000 members, both public safety and GIS practitioners alike, representing all levels of government, the private sector, and academia. We were formed almost 20 years ago as an alliance between a number of prominent national associations, some of which you see here, and we've evolved into a formal organization over the course of that time. And just as a side note, everything we do make available at no cost to you. So our mission is to improve the safety, resilience, and well-being of our communities and to improve government and non-governmental organization responses to chronic and emergent public safety threats and incidents. Events like our Prep Tech Talk webinar series are just one way that we work to encourage and foster collaboration and build the capacity of the community. So just a quick note to see who's on the webinar with us today. We're incredibly excited to have you all with us. I think we are almost at 600 registrants. I'm sure you will all leave with some valuable information to help you and your agencies prepare.
Hey, Terry, the slides are not advancing.
Oh, what do you see right now?
Just the first slide.
I'm glad you told me now. Let's keep going. So here's the map in a second.
Yep, now we got it.
Thanks. Okay. All of this will be made available after the fact, so you'll see all the exciting stuff as we go. So this is a representation of everybody here today. Like I said, we're almost at 600. So a lot of folks on. Thank you very much. And as I said, I do think you'll find a lot of valuable information today as we present to you. So with that, now I'm going to go to our federal section. Really lucky to have some pretty impressive folks today. I'd like to introduce Christina Finch, who serves as the Federal Emergency Management Agency's Response Geospatial Office Deputy Branch Chief. Throughout her 20 years of experience in emergency management, Christina has worked across a variety of areas: planning, mitigation, response, and recovery, to inform data-driven decision-making. She has specific background and expertise in hurricane planning, mitigation, disaster operations, geospatial technology, socioeconomic vulnerability, and community resilience. So with that, Christina, I will hand it over to you to get us started with our federal resources portion of the webinar.
Thanks, Terry, and I appreciate you and the NAPSG Foundation inviting the FEMA Response Geospatial Office to join the session today. We're excited to be here, and we appreciate you creating this forum to help us engage with others as we're in the midst of the Atlantic hurricane season. So just a couple quick notes from me to kick us off in our section. As Terry mentioned, I'm the Response Geospatial Office Deputy Branch Chief, but for those of you that know Katie Zezima, she is our Branch Chief, and she's been out on parental leave, but she'll be returning to the office in July, and we're excited to have her back. So our team is located at FEMA headquarters in Washington, D.C., and we're organized in three main components. Our analytics team provides predictive modeling, analytical products in the form of maps and dashboards to help inform response. We staff a number of positions in the National Response Coordination Center. Our operations and engagement team helps create forums like this one and provide content that we can share with our stakeholders and partners, as well as gather remote sensing and aerial imagery to help identify damages and situational awareness. And then finally, we have our IT data and systems team, which helps keep everything running and supports all of our systems and services, ArcGIS Online being the one that most of you are probably most familiar with. So we're fortunate today that we're going to have presentations from two members of the RGO team with the analytics team, as well as our operations and engagement team. But overall, the mission of our team is to provide data, tools, resources, applications to help emergency managers and decision makers make data-informed decisions before, during, and after an incident. So some of the resources we'll be showing today will provide you some examples of the types of data and products that we've provided in previous events. So as you all know, no two storms are the same. Each one is different and unique in its own way. And that's also true of the products that our team develops. So it's based on a number of factors, the types of engagement we have with our state, our engagement with our FEMA regional counterparts, direction from our leadership, and dependency on things like funding and resources all help drive the suite of products and services that we provide for each event. But if there's one message I'd like to encourage you to take away from today's session, it's to ensure that you know who your FEMA regional GIS point of contact is, because from a FEMA headquarters perspective, our job is to help support that FEMA region and make sure they have the data and imagery that they need. And they're the primary conduit to help figure out how to get it to you and how that can be best be used to support your missions. So I'm glad that we're all gathered here today on a blue sky coordination call to help make these connections, to meet each other, and to highlight some of the information and services that we have to provide. So I'll be turning it over. We've got two members of the Response Geospatial Office presenting. The first one is going to be Dr. Adam Barker, and he is the team lead for our analytics team.
Right on. Quick mic check. All right.
You're good.
Thanks, Christina. So I'll just start by saying the success of the RGO is because of the team, and that's really no different for the various subsections. So I'd like to begin by recognizing my colleagues. First, Eric Edlund and Adriana Lard. Both of them are sitting very close to me right now. So this presentation is meant to be quite general. There's no math or any complex operations. I'm really here to talk about the fundamentals of analysis, in particular geospatial analysis. And it's really with focus to what happens at FEMA. There's a lot of details that will not be included or overlooked. And the discussion is really sourced from lessons learned from our collective experience supporting the situational awareness section in the NRCC, which is the National Response Coordination Center. And this is largely for major activations like we would have soon for a hurricane. So again, the theme is really fundamentals, and we'll be discussing methodologies and limitations to those methodologies or methods. But I would like to say that there's an alternative theme throughout this presentation, and that's that words matter. And so the vocabulary that we use is critical and especially important during like a major incident where being concise and clear is again important. So let's start by looking at a couple of maps. The two maps that are shown at the bottom here are typical of what we would produce during an NRCC activation. The first is just a snapshot in time looking at one of the various lifelines, which is the power outages. And this is during IDA. And so ideally, this is just a snapshot in time. So ideally, this would be complemented by some sort of graph showing time series. But right there, you can understand some of the complexities of that. Like a time series is great, but how do you put a time series on a map like this, especially if you decide you want to look at more than one state, or if you want to start looking at the various counties or parishes or any of those individual areas that are impacted. So it does get messy fast, but the efficiency of a map is very evident. And in this map, you can see the far field impacts of IDA, which show up very clearly as power outages, and that was really the signature of IDA. And then the second map, I know it's hard to see, but it is showing what I'm going to be talking about for the rest of the map, which is impact analysis. And so this is again a map that's summarizing the impacts. This was during Tropical Storm Hillary. And it integrates several key features, but the purpose of this map was to identify to senior leaders what populations are going to be impacted by that storm, and more appropriately, where those populations are and how they interact with certain things like burn scars. I like to make this kind of map. The types of map I don't like to make are the one that I'm showing here, which is a resource laydown map. These are the ones that often consume much of our time during activations and are very critical for senior leaders, but unfortunately they are a beast to make. So let's start by talking about methodology. So what I'm going to be talking about here is impact analysis, and just briefly, impact analysis is really summarizing potential harm, and that could be harm to people, it can be to the built environment. And I'm going to begin this presentation with talking about analysis that is conducted without any hazard observation. So really, we're talking about using models, and that can span both pre and post incident. Post incident would be using hindcast models and the like. And it's important that there's really no one way to perform an impact analysis, and this is again where those words matter, because we can think of impact analysis as having two end members with a number of different types in between. The most simple case is exposure analysis, and then as we add more sophistication and rigor, you get into the consequence analysis, and that can be using things like fragility curves and so on. In its most basic form, exposure analysis is really just the intersection of a hazard extent with population or building data. And this is the type of analysis that you'd be doing early on when hazard models are really uncertain, or you just have a very general polygon of areas you think are going to be impacted. And it's also important to note that often this is done knowing that that forecast is going to change. And again, this is the only type of analysis you can do when there's only flood extents. But there is utility to this type of analysis in that, one, it's simple to do. And it can also help answer very general questions like, where are the greatest impacts going to be, which is general, but you can also be more specific, like what hospitals could be impacted. And also there's planning purposes, so trying to help the remote sensors with the imagery collection plan and so on. The map at left is, again, just an exposure analysis map that we made during Hurricane Milton. The hurricane is still offshore, and so the hazard models we were using were P-surge and an inland flood model from the Army Corps. A couple of things, again, it's showing where those impacts are, but there's some things I don't generally put on maps like this. I try not to put a lot of numbers. One, oftentimes those numbers are really only useful if they're an order of magnitude, but the models we're using are ensemble models often, and so they're looking at the worst case scenario. So we know that those numbers are going to be high. And again, it's a snapshot in time. So to make this more useful, you have to do this type of analysis every day. So you have to repeat this, see how things are changing. That change is just as important. It provides a lot of great context. And then to the left, as we increase sophistication, we go into the consequence analysis realm. And we need more than just hazard extents for this. So we need some information about the hazard depth. Sorry, I'm just getting a sense of time. A well-known example of this is hazardous, that is. this is a more complex analysis or complex model that brings in those hazard models that both have extent and information about the severity, but you're also including things like fragility curves. So you're relating the hazard to some defined loss, and that could also be the easiest way to think about that is a flood model where you have the flood depth, and that's empirically related to either damage loss in economic terms or some sort of just general damage type. Okay. So next we're going to switch to model impact analysis with observations, and by observations I'm not talking about visual damage assessments, so that's something that the geospatial damage assessments are for. What I'm talking about is still doing the same type of analysis, either exposure analysis or consequence type analysis, but using, instead of models, we're using actual observations. So before I get into the observation, let's just step through an example. So this is Puerto Rico during Hurricane Fiona. And what I'm showing here is a flood model that's only showing the flood extent that was provided for us by the National Water Center. Again, this is extremely useful. We can get a lot of good information from this. But if we step to the next product, this is an actual observation product created using SAR. And so it shows a much more refined area, and that's extremely useful for improving those impact analysis. So again, we've switched from models to observations. I'm going to quickly go to the next slide. One of the fallacies we often see is that you really present the models that you have, but the reality is way more complex. And so what I was showing was just riverine flooding based from precipitation, but there's also flash flooding. There's also rainfall-induced landslides, which is shown here. And so, or sorry, this is landslide susceptibility. And so oftentimes we're really only capturing and presenting one type of damage, and that is something you need to pay attention to. Going into visualizations, things that we've learned is you really need to put information on maps, because maps tend to get sent around and you don't control who that map gets emailed to. So including a bluff-like statement is useful, but you really have to develop a narrative of the map, and that is something that you have to work with either using your planners or so on. And then another key is we use a lot of dashboards, and dashboards are useful because they're a window into our coordination center, so somebody in the region can see exactly what we're doing. But just quickly getting into some of the limitations. So we've already talked about the complexity of the hazard, and really it's the complexity of the incident. There's more than just a hurricane has floods, tornadoes, wind, and so on. And then there's a lot of compounding factors. So we know based on claims data that oftentimes the damage to households aren't just because of wind, they're because of say a weaker wind that blew over a tree, and that tree hit a house, and then the rain came into that exposed building. Snapshots and times are great, but you really need to provide some sort of temporal history that's helping with context. This is a tough one. It's not always, we don't always know what questions senior leaders are trying to ask. We also are not the ones who are briefing the products. That is, when I say we, the analysts that created it. And then this one is interesting. So duplication, automation, and dashboard. So duplication is something I think it's okay, because an analyst needs to, we all have different senior leaders. Automation is great, but you also need to know what you're doing. And if you can't, if the work is completely automated, you lose kind of sense of what's happening. So just to add a few things to help mitigate these limitations, repeat analysis, adding caveats to the maps, doing time series approaches, communicating with senior leaders during steady state is obviously important, and then adding as much information as you can to maps is key. I'll just end with, we don't work alone. We really need to, all the hazards and all the important information is really provided by other federal agencies, and I'm showing a few here. But for you out there, please work with your FEMA region if you can. They're really your first outlet, and I think that's it. I had to kind of cruise through things, but I'll hand it over to Devin.
Thanks. I'll provide a quick intro, Adam. So thank you for highlighting some of the Response Geospatial Office products for exposure and impact. Next, I'd like to introduce another member of our team, Dr. Devin Maloney. Devin is a relatively new addition to our team. But before she'd like to present, I'd like to just acknowledge and share that we are losing a team member this year in the next couple of weeks, actually. For those of you that have worked with Glenn Russell in the past, he has been our remote sensing coordinator. And we would like to thank him for his decades of public service in this role and for helping us onboard and transition some of his role to Devin, who's going to be sharing more about how we use imagery today. So take it away, Devin.
Hey everyone, thanks Christina for that intro. Yeah, like Christina mentioned, my name is Devin Maloney, and I'm also part of the Response Geospatial Office here at FEMA HQ, and I work with the remote sensing team. And the remote sensing team right now is just pretty small at the moment. It just consists of myself, Devin, and my colleague Glenn Russell. But I'm excited to introduce what we can provide and how you can access imagery through us during an incident. So here at the RGO, we can generally provide 3 different types of imagery. We can provide visual satellite imagery, which can be used for a variety of applications, including situational awareness of things like flood, fire, tornado damage. We can also provide commercial and open source synthetic aperture radar imagery, which is ideal for like things like water detection, especially when the area has cloud cover, as radar can penetrate through clouds. Most of these satellite imagery sensors aren't fine scale enough for structure by structure damage assessments, but it can be useful for general situational awareness. And finally, we can also acquire high resolution aerial imagery captured on planes by either mission assigning our federal partners like NOAA or the Civil Air Patrol, or contracting with a commercial vendor to collect that imagery. And that high resolution aerial imagery is fine scale enough to conduct structure by structure damage assessments. So it'll be something like less than 15 centimeters per pixel, which is fine enough to tell things like damage on roofs. And as we know, most geospatial analysts are not necessarily imagery experts as well. And so we can also provide a variety of analytical or derived products from that imagery. So depending on the imagery, we can calculate things like burn intensity, water indexes, or vegetation change, which can then be vectorized to give you things like fire perimeters or flood extents. And those vectors can then be used in other vector-based analysis, like intersecting them with roads, structures, or critical infrastructure. And finally, we can also buy commercial analytical products such as SAR-derived flood depth estimates seen here. But acquiring imagery during or shortly after a disaster can be really tricky, and there are always limitations to the availability of imagery, which can impact the timeliness of imagery acquisition for incident response. Weather is a persistent problem. Visual imagery from satellites can be obstructed by cloud cover, or adverse conditions can prevent planes from taking off to collect that aerial imagery. We can also have timing issues, so it can take a day or so to get flight crews in the air, or it can take us a little while to get satellites tasked because they're limited by their orbital paths. Different imagery sources may also have really different geographic footprints, so some satellites will provide really large scale coverage, but will be relatively coarse resolution, and other satellites will provide very high resolution imagery, but only cover a small geographic extent. So that's always something to keep in mind. And while we can access satellite imagery free of charge through our NGA and NRO partners, it can usually be pretty costly to acquire satellite imagery. So that's something we have to weigh on our end. And we are still waiting for guidance from our leadership on if and how there will be state cost sharing into this next disaster season. But with those caveats, imagery, of course, can be a really impactful way of understanding a disaster's extent and intensity. So if you are a local or state partner interested in imagery during or after an incident, you can always reach out to your FEMA Regional Geospatial Office. And those FEMA Regional Geospatial Offices can mission assign the collection of aerial imagery, again, through our federal partners like NOAA or Civil Air Patrol, or they can reach out to Glenn and myself to do it from headquarters. In our office, the RGO, we can also initiate any of the commercial contracts for imagery or satellite-derived products. We're also not the only source for imagery during an incident. I think next you're going to hear from the NASA Disasters Response Coordination System and Katie Piccioni, so I'll let them explain their capabilities, but they are a great resource. And another way that you can access imagery from satellites during a disaster is any federal government employee has the ability to access commercial satellite imagery through a platform called GEDD Pro, a tricky acronym. And if you're a federal employee, you can just sign up. And if you're a state or local or tribal or territorial partner, you need a federal sponsor to do it. And Glenn and I are happy to be that sponsor. So feel free to reach out to either of us to set up that account, but that will give you a certain, I think, time limited or area limited access to imagery over a location if you are a local partner looking for imagery during a incident. So with all that in mind, I kept it pretty short, but please feel free to reach out to Glenn and I via email if you have any questions about what we can provide or how to request imagery during an incident.
Thanks, Stefan, for highlighting some of the types of imagery the Response Geospatial Office has leveraged in the past. If you're looking for more information on the Response Geospatial Office, you can Google the FEMA Geospatial Resource Center. We'll make sure to share that link with the materials following today's session. But I hope everybody gained something new you didn't maybe know coming into the conversation, and I encourage you to work with your FEMA regional geospatial counterparts and others before an event, but then to help identify what resources may be available to you during your planning and response for hurricane season. So with that, again, thank you for the opportunity, Terry. I'll turn it back over to you.
Great. Thank you to our amazing FEMA partners. Really appreciate you guys being on today and sharing those resources. I know a lot of folks were probably diligently writing notes down. So thank you again for all of that. So we'll switch gears a little bit. And next I'm going to introduce Katie Piccioni with NASA's Disaster Response Coordination System. If you're not familiar, they work with subject matter experts across the agency and other stakeholders in the emergency management community to develop Earth observation data products that fill information gaps during disasters. So with that, Katie, if you're able to take control of the slides, I will hand it over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Terry. Can I just get a mic check real quick?
Loud and clear.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And it's such a pleasure to be here at the Prep Tech Talk today. I am very excited to share some information on resources available through NASA's Disaster Response Coordination System. I'm the response coordination lead for the DRCS, and so my personal email is right there. But for additional questions or to request data or request a DRCS activation, please feel free to email me and my team at drcs@nasa.gov. Just the kind of top level takeaway, if you take a screenshot of this slide, this is the one. At a high level, the NASA Disaster Response Coordination System can provide open, free, medium and low resolution imagery, both optical imagery and SAR. We also will use that imagery to make hazard maps and perform other spatial analysis to support response operations. You can make a request, like I said, by emailing drcs@nasa.gov. And all of our data is publicly available through the disasters portal, which is maps.disasters.nasa.gov. So, if we do activate or we're requested to activate, we post all of our data publicly through that portal, so both the requester and the rest of the community can easily access our data. I'll talk a little bit more about that. At a high level, the Disasters Response Coordination System is part of a larger disasters program here at NASA in the Earth Sciences Applied Sciences program. And we have three main program components. So in addition to supporting response, we also have a portfolio of science research projects that we invest in. And that's both internal research at NASA and research with university partners and other institutions. And then we also have our disasters partnership and learning platform, our portal. And so in addition to those two elements, which are a little bit broader than our response component, I just wanted to mention that DRCS is part of this larger disasters ecosystem here at NASA. But I'm going to be talking specifically about how DRCS supports response. So we have three main goals and objectives with the Disasters Response Coordination System, and they are to, number one, build capacity to expand access and awareness of Earth science solutions for disaster response. Two, to enable and increase the use of Earth observation data and apply lessons learned during disasters, and then to build a community with the both the emergency management community and also the disaster science community, to promote training and collaboration on the use of Earth observation data in disasters. One question we often get is, why is NASA here? And we have part of the answer is that NASA has a huge variety of Earth observation tools available to us. This is just the image of our satellites, both current and present, and instruments on the International Space Station that are available to DRCS and to the community to use during disasters. A big part of what DRCS does is we're over here trying to figure out, okay, which of these tools and the new science that's going on with these tools might be useful to support response in new ways. So we have this eye toward innovation using the latest Earth science data and tools available. In addition to the satellites, we also have a fleet of aircraft, mostly equipped with science instruments, but sometimes those are also useful during disasters. Here are some examples of the types of products that we can provide. So we can help provide additional awareness for power outages using using the VIIRS instruments nighttime lights data and nighttime lights data products that have been developed at Goddard Space Flight Center. We also have a number of different data layers that we can produce, looking at land surface change and indicators of possible damage, again, at a high level. So this is coarse resolution, but also looking over a broad area. We can do landslide mapping from optical imagery. We can develop both true color and false color imagery from assets like Sentinel-1 and Landsat, so multispectral optical imagery. But we can process that data to highlight things like flood extent, burned areas, tornado tracks, etc. And then we also have a number of different analyses that our science teams have developed for looking at hazard extent and severity across many hazard types. Flood and fire are shown here. The way the DRCS is designed, it's sort of a hub and spoke model. So we have the DRCS project office, which is myself, the response coordination lead, and then also we've got 4 of us in total. But the real strength of the program is that so the 5 of us, or the 4 of us, are based at NASA Langley Research Center in Hampton, Virginia. But the real strength of the program is that we have center coordinators at 6 different NASA centers, and each of those coordinators are within that center building a community of practice with scientists who are doing the latest, greatest Earth science research. And so we really have this broad network of experts across many different hazard types, many different remote sensing types and asset types, and analysis methods as well. And so we're constantly kind of reaching out to this network to identify solutions that we can bring to a response. Those center coordinators are also really great points of contact for community building within FEMA, the sort of regional communities. So the 6 centers are the Ames Research Center, which is based in the Bay Area, the Jet Propulsion Lab in Pasadena, California, Johnson Space Center outside of Houston, Goddard Space Flight Center in Greenbelt, Maryland, Langley Research Center in Hampton, Virginia, and Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama. And what we've done is we've sort of assigned each center 1 or 2 regions. So our center coordinators there have been very active recently in reaching out to build state and local relationships to facilitate receiving requests and sharing data during activations, and also capacity building in blue skies. So if you're interested in connecting with our coordinators in your region, again, please reach out to us at drcs@nasa.gov, and we can put you in contact with myself and with our teammates who are a little bit more regionally based as well. On that note, I'm over here saying, yes, state and local, state and local. And one of the strengths of the Disaster Response Coordination Center is that while we do activate only on request, we can receive requests from federal, state, tribal, territorial, and local government agencies. So our activations are not predicated on a presidential disaster declaration or a Stafford Act declaration, or even a state declaration of emergency. We decide whether to activate solely whether on the questions that we're being asked are a good fit for data that we have available. So, if there's an incident occurring, please reach out to us. Those requests go to me. And the first thing we look at is, okay, are there, for this question, do we have data that is going to be the right spatial resolution, temporal resolution, data type? Do we have experts who can actually develop a data set to answer this question? And when the answer is yes, we'll go ahead and we'll activate. So actually, I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but we'll go ahead and we'll activate, and we'll have an activation to try to make data products that are actually useful to you all. And so again, what kinds of data can you ask for? I'll predicate this by saying that we are in the process of doing a fairly substantial inventory of all of the different data sets available at NASA. With our draft count is something like over 150 unique data products and tools that our team can provide. And so these span a wide range of, again, imagery types, hazard types, technology, etc. And so these are some examples of products that you can ask us for and that we can deliver. So I've tried to break them up into categories that hopefully track well to emergency management needs. But the first is imagery for situational awareness. Like I said, we can provide true color imagery, false color imagery with various band combinations. We can look at provide imagery that highlights vegetation, burn scars, water. And then I've already mentioned the nighttime lights data. We can also provide spatial data sets, both rasters and vector data sets on the hazards themselves. So I think of this as data describing the what, right? And so this is water extents and depths, fire points and perimeters, burn scar mapping and delineation, burn severity analysis, land cover and surface change, landslide detection, and then additionally air quality data and detections of severe weather systems. And then finally, the third category of products that we are, I would say that these are more, everything we provide is experimental, but these are more experimental, but data where we're actually doing the spatial analysis to provide some insight on impact. So we're taking those, water extent rasters and overlaying them or doing a spatial analysis with bridges, roads, other infrastructure, houses, demographic data sets. And so we're using those products to look at things like where may power outages be occurring in rural areas. We've got a couple different damage proxy products, and we're increasingly looking at where infrastructure might have been affected. So again, if those are often needs during disasters, please let us know if any of these are areas where we can be of help. Once we receive a request and we go through our screening process, this is a high-level view of what our activations look like. I will say, like what Devin was saying, timeliness can be a challenge for some of the assets we have access to, especially because they're either low resolution and very quick to provide data, or higher resolution, but might have a time delay of several days before a good collection occurs. So it usually takes us about a day to activate, and then within 4 or 5 days, we usually can have products available. Again, depending on cloud cover and other contingencies, but we really strive to, once we publish those products, iterate with the community as much as possible. And we're always receiving feedback and listening for new unmet needs where we might be able to help fill gaps. All of our data, like I said, is posted publicly on the disasters mapping portal, maps.disasters.nasa.gov. This is a screenshot of it, but the thing I really want to point out is that there's this big red banner at the top. And when we activate, there is a link to, we set up an incident gallery for each incident. This is based on ArcGIS Enterprise. And so all of the products we publish will be available through a link in this big red box at the top. Past incidents, there's a menu at the toward about halfway down the page where you can find those. And we also have a list of near real-time products, some of which may be helpful for like early awareness. This is an example of what one of our product galleries looks like. So anything we make for an incident, we post in a gallery like this. All the products are open access through ArcGIS Online. We publish data both as ArcGIS REST services and as web mapping services. Most products are also available for direct download. We can also set up portal-to-portal connections where that might be relevant or useful for stakeholders. So finally, this is just kind of a look at what our last year has been. We had 16 activations in the since last June, and kind of spanning all hazard types, and also both domestic and we had several international activations as well last year. So with that, I've got this slide again, and Terry, I'll turn it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. I know you had a lot to cover. I remember exactly how it went last year. Folks were really excited about some of the products that you all deliver, like the nighttime lights one. So thank you for sharing and making sure other folks are aware of them. Next, I want to turn it over to Zan Fredericks. She is the Emergency Response Coordinator for the USGS National Geospatial Program, overseeing emergency response activities and the Bureau's Geospatial Information Response team. She collaborates with a variety of partners to aid discovery and coordination of geospatial data, as well as the delivery of actionable science-based information to the Bureau, other agencies, and emergency responders. Thank you, Zan. Over to you.
I'm really excited to be here with you today. We've heard from Christina, Adam, Devin, Glenn. I really do miss you, sir. It was a pleasure learning underneath you. I will miss you. Devin, welcome. And then Katie, what a way to set this up. It's fantastic. We've heard how important it is in order to become more resilient that we need to be flexible and adaptable. And we need strong connections. We need the right geospatial data at the right time to help us respond to disasters. Now, Terry, I'm unable to see the slides. Are you seeing them on your end?
I am as an attendee, but let me reshare them just so you can also see them and proceed. So hold on. Well, I'm sorry. I don't want to make everybody watch me go through them all.
Nope, I've got it. I've taken
Okay.
control and
Okay.
got a little trick. Let's go here. See if that works.
Ooh, you're good.
Okay, fantastic. Well, I am excited to talk today about what the USGS is offering. First and foremost, the National Geospatial Program of the USGS has this broad portfolio. It's cross-cutting. There's so many different initiatives. We've got emergency response, we've got geospatial research, and one of the cornerstones of the National Geospatial Program is actually the national map. And this is that collaborative effort among USGS and governmental or academic, nonprofit, industry partners, really to improve and deliver topographic information for the nation through a suite of products, services, applications, and the idea is to provide access to the base geospatial information, which you can imagine is very important during emergency response. We've got the topography, natural landscape, even the built environment of the United States and the territories. And these data sets available free of charge and without use restrictions. And one way to take advantage of them is through services. You can ingest them into your own map and applications. I encourage you to visit apps.nationalmap.gov/services. You can even click on the link if you'd like to get started. We all have our own maps. We're familiar with how they work, how they look, what they symbolize, and it's really important to kind of keep that look and feel of your own map. Adam, you made a good point. Words matter. So if you know what your words mean, maybe just bring our services into your dashboard so your leadership knows exactly what they're looking at. Now, as the Emergency Response Coordinator for the National Geospatial Program, I chair the Geospatial Information Response Team for the USGS. And while this is leveraging USGS resources, we also leverage partner assets. This really lets us make sure that we've got timely geospatial data available for, first and foremost, our scientists, but also for emergency managers, land and resource response. And it's really to support the response to a variety of hazards. You see them here, but what's fantastic about the GIRT is that the team is working to facilitate both the coordination, the communication dissemination, but also that deconfliction of any resource acquisition. That's really important. We want to stretch those taxpayer dollars as far as we can go. We don't want to duplicate effort. That increases risk, not just the use of resources. During Blue Sky, the GIRT team is pretty small. It's a core team of 6. I'm the chair. Cindy Rachel's our deputy chair. We've got operations officers Stephen Hack, Jim Lenore, and Amanda Schoen, as well as Andrew Collins. If you ever see them on one of the event response team calls, they're representing GIRT. But then during an event, we do expand to include other subject matter experts. So think about our AROS team, the hazards data distribution system will help you there get imagery, the natural hazards mission area, National Land Imaging, NUSO, that's our National Uncrewed Systems Office. It's really important that we pool the subject matter expertise from the people that really understand the environment that's being impacted and not just rely on our geospatial expertise to get them the data they need. We collate all this information and put it together into event support maps based on hazards, and we put all of those event support maps on a hub site. Now, you'll think, right, event support maps, it's very similar to any other multivariate map that has all that information that agencies are providing. What I want to highlight here is that public applications button that you see on the left. Again, while the GIRT's mission is first and foremost to support USGS scientists, in order to make sure they have the data to fulfill their mission, no matter what happens, we do link to other open resources. This is both from other projects and programs from across the USGS, as well as FEMA, NASA, NOAA, Army Corps. If you land on our page, we just want to make sure you're getting the data you need. There is no room for ego and emergency response. We just want to help you get there. Now, for the USGS, when most people think of us, they're thinking topo maps, and those are a great resource for emergency responders. And what's neat with a lot of the USGS tools, kind of a sidebar, is the National Map Training video team does this really great job of explaining how to work with some of the tools and applications. And one of the videos that they recently put out was about the application called Topo Builder. So if you're interested in either an on-demand topo from Topo Builder or one of our staged topo maps, for emergency responders, GIRT has partnered with the Defense Logistics Agency, and we can drop ship those maps to your EOC free of charge. So if you're wondering, what is Topo Builder? It's this application that lets you create an on-demand topo, centered where you want instead of on-grid, with multiple scales and using the best available data from the national map. And that's really important. And it only takes 3 easy steps. So first you'll check your map type, 7.5 minute topo or 100K, zoom to your area of interest. Step 2, do you want a custom area? Just go ahead and click anywhere on the map. You can also select by grid. You can edit your layers. Turn off any layers you don't want included in the delivery. Then you can choose the format. We've got it in geospatial PDF as well as a GeoTIFF, and adjust your contour smoothing. Then you add it to your cart. And if you've added all you want to your cart, then you can check out. Step 3, you just need to enter an email address, hit checkout. You'll get a confirmation number as well as a confirmation email. And what's nice is by getting an email, you're actually linking to the product instead of it taking up space in your inbox. Now, a reminder, click on that link within 60 days because otherwise it will expire and you'll have to submit it again. But on-demand topos are a really great way to make sure you are getting the best available data from the national map, because oftentimes those staged topos have come out and then another great LiDAR project may have hit the scene and you're missing out on that great data. Now, we talked about the fact that resilience requires resources. We've heard from great examples today, even the topo maps. And there are 2 big M's when it comes to resilience that I think of, and that's modeling and mitigation. And both are supported by the resources, whether that's the data, the tools, especially the expertise. We have a user engagement office of the National Geospatial Program, and they help us better navigate national map offerings and They can even help you navigate those national map offerings. They're across the nation, and that's one of the things that they offer is if you've looked at a training video and you're still not sure, it's really important to practice these tools before an event hits. Now, when I think modeling, I'm thinking forecasts, hindcasts, you mentioned, Adam, floodplain mapping, inundation modeling, that kind of thing. For mitigation, think about how you might reduce the chance of the negative impact, whether that's having a supply stash of power banks, a stash of fuel and food and water, whether you sandbag, whether you evacuate. What I wanted to mention today before we get into the thick of things, though, is that there's a third M that's also really important that often gets overlooked, and that's morale. We can't possibly know what everyone else is going through, whether it's the people on the ground being impacted, whether it's the emergency responders, whether it's you on the phone right now trying to piece together all the information that people are asking you for. Hour after hour, day after day, seeing the devastation, if you're looking at some of that great imagery that was mentioned, it can be really depressing. And this is one time we don't want to feel like our stomach's dropping out, right? Going down a big hill on a roller coaster. If anything, we want to feel that anticipatory feeling of going up the hill, feeling prepared, being ready. And it's really important in order to do so to know what resources are available to you, but also to know how to use them. That way, at least you feel more prepared. So take Daytona Beach. There's a roller coaster down in the bottom right. Did you know that you can identify what 3D elevation program LiDAR point clouds exist in your area of interest? And you can even visualize them without having to pull them to your local system. You just need a web browser and an internet connection. We've got the 3D LiDAR viewer, so you can identify and then pull points into the 3D EPTEAM viewer. You can look at these data and the structures, kind of like this look here. This is actually a grab from the 3D EPTEAM viewer. And what's really cool is once you identify the area of interest, you can capture it as a link, which I've done here, and send it to your team, and they'll open the EPTEAM viewer looking at your exact vantage. And that's really important. You'll notice I colored this a little differently just for ease of view, but once you become familiar with the tools, you'll really know how to leverage them. And it's really important because practice in emergency response does not make perfect, at least not for me, but practice does make progress. And to feel more proficient with these tools is really important. So if you go now on your mobile device and you pan around, you zoom, you rotate, and get more familiar with some of the tools mentioned, you'll feel much better prepared as the storm season progresses. So between the strong connections, the positive relationships, right, and the open resources that are strengthening all of those, there is providing easier access to geospatial resources, hopefully when they're needed most. So I encourage you to visit usgs.gov/GERT. And just remember that a couple lessons learned is sometimes there's already a tool for that. You've heard lots of great resources mentioned today. Take a look through, see if it already exists so you don't duplicate that effort. Also that practice does make progress. So get out there now, practice some of these tools. And 3 is phone a friend. We're here, we're doing this right now to try and help each other. NASA and Kurt get on the call when we can during the off season to get to know each other more and get to become more familiar with what each one's working on, just so we exactly can do this, be a little bit better prepared. And also, whether it's an NGP tool, right, national hazards, we can point you in the right direction. We may not always have that tool, but we may know our friends at FEMA or NOAA or Army Corps or National Park Service or somewhere else might actually have those tools. And it is important that we keep an eye on each other for that morale standpoint. So with that, Terry, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Zan. You guys do some amazing work at USGS, and you are particularly good at collaborating, coordinating with folks, and making sure they get access to the data and resources they need. Thank you to all of our federal partners. Everyone does such great work. And now we're going to maybe switch gears and hear from some of our superstars working at the state level. So up first, we have Roger Cleaves from Cal OES. Roger has over 15 years of experience in geospatial and information technology solutions across professional and military settings. He brings a robust perspective to emergency management geospatial advancements. His background includes significant work in designing and implementing geospatial applications, managing data, and developing innovative solutions for critical operations, including emergency management and environmental contexts. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Roger. Make sure you can see your story map.
Oh, all right. Thank you, Terry. Appreciate the chance to get on here and chat. I'll try to go as fast as I can because 10 minutes is a short time period to just go over the breadth of everything that we're doing at Cal OES. I'm Roger Cleese. I'm the Geospatial Innovation Architect here at Cal OES. We have about three architects and one manager, we're very top heavy, but we also have a robust team of developers down through our stack, and we sit inside of IT, and we really help our entire organization across the full breadth of all the programs that we're doing. Just one quick thing is, you're looking at these images are kind of across the top. This is kind of GIS in action over the years at Cal OES, and one quote that stood out to me that I don't know if my CIO stole it from someone or if he's just claiming it now, but everyone gathers around a map, no one gathers around a spreadsheet, and that's kind of resonate with a lot of folks when we start looking at a lot of the stuff that we're doing here. So I don't need to explain everyone.
Sorry, Roger. Are you able? It's not letting me. Are you able to hit that little slider on the? Let
me try again.
Left. It wasn't letting me, or else I would have done it for you.
Is it showing again? Try one more time.
Okay.
You see it now?
Yes. Oh, there we go.
Good?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Anyways, I'll show the cool images at the top again real quick, just so you can see kind of the work what we've done over the different years. I don't need to explain to anyone here about the different phases of emergency management and how that kind of goes hand in hand with what we're doing. And I think the big thing for us when we talk through the products that we're generating is that we're touching all parts of the organization, and it's all one big cyclical connected event, regardless of where you are in the phase. So I'm just going to kind of go through some of the products we've been working on. So California has the Wildfire Forecast Threat Intelligence Integration Center. We've put together an ArcGIS hub to kind of house all of the content and the information. And the idea of this was, when the bill was passed, was to serve as basically the National Hurricane Center, but for California for wildfire. So it brings together CAL FIRE, Cal OES, National Guard, U.S. Forest Service, National Weather Service, our public utilities, and some of our private utilities as well, into one kind of, and the academia folks as well. So it brings it all into one central place where we have all the information, all the data, all the applications, and we're kind of aggregating and centralizing off of authoritative data and sharing it out. So you can go to the hub whenever you want to kind of see the content. A few of the applications, my mouse is a little sticky. One is the situational awareness dashboard. This one's used operationally on the hub site. They put it up on the SOC wall when things are happening. We're pulling together Irwin data and performing some filters on it where it's just looking at bigger fires that we're kind of paying attention to. This was built in dashboard with some arcade. Talk about our initial attack viewer. This one is, I think, probably our most data intensive application. We're pulling together multiple different data sources every minute and updating almost as a stock ticker for emerging wildfire incidents. So we have Irwin. We're now pulling in NOAA's next gen fire system satellite detections. CHP has their dispatch calls that go out. And we also are connecting with a few different areas regarding their dispatch data through PulsePoint. And we're planning on bringing in the National Guard Fire Guard detections as well. So there's a data service for this. It's a lot of our Forest Service partners are using it because there's not a good place to go for statewide comprehensive alert detections for new wildfires. And the idea is you see one come through, 15 minutes is the red, 30 minutes is yellow, and then it kind of grays out as it goes on, and it's the last 24 hours. I think one of the cool things is you can click an incident, you can zoom in. We're doing some arcade to give you what the current weather is from the nearest weather station, what the forecasted weather is for the next day, and we also are looking for the nearest alert wildfire camera within 10 miles. So you can quickly just get to the content that you need and do a quick analysis. And our folks are using this to do then quick kind of spot modeling to see where the fire is going to go in the next 3 hours. My mouse is horrible, keeps jumping. Our NWCG 7-day fire forecast. This is NIFC data that we're just kind of compiling into a statewide view. That's something, with northern, we have 2 geographic coordination areas in California, so with northern and southern, and we're also pulling in a few of the PSA boundaries from the Nevada region just because of the Eastern Sierras. So this is kind of just a quick one-stop shop to pull all that data together into a nice way to view it. We're launching My Plan 2.0. It actually might be already live. This slide might be old, but as the state hazard mitigation plan explorer, allowing counties to go in and kind of see the analysis that came out of that report, pull out the data and the maps and the information for their counties and start making decisions off of it. So this is coming out, I think it's out actually now. And then this is another tool we're kind of piecing together right now that we're working on. Is California has a wildfire preposition fund that we can help counties basically apply for prepositioning, and we can move resources and pay for the overtime to get them into areas where we think wildfire or flood or mud and debris flow might be occurring soon. Historically, this data was all over. You had to go look for your different NWS forecast data. You had to go hunt down your fuel data. You had to pull in that NWCG data separately and kind of fill out the PDF form and then email it in. And so we're working towards a full automation, but right now, at least we're pulling all the data into a viewer where we're looking at the next 3 days, max temp, max winds, minimum RH, and kind of aggregating down to these hexagons and then blowing it up to a county level. So folks from the county can come in, pick their county, give them the results on the right, and they can start filling out their forms. When we get to response and advanced planning, this is the our breadwinner. This is what's up on the State Operations Center wall. We call it the SOC deck because it's actually kind of modeled after the Living Atlas. There was a Living Atlas beta application that came out. It was like indicators of the world, and it kind of gave you a brief overview of what's going on with all these different aggregate data sets. And so we decided to take the same framework, whereas each one of these is a separate card. They can be swapped out depending on the incident, maintains the same application. You can change the view and kind of tailor it for what's going on. And the coolest thing is in here, we actually have a shelters card. It's not showing up here right now on this one, that we worked with our Health and Human Services and Social Services departments, and they've built the card themselves. They've built the data inputs and they're sharing it to us, and we just make sure it's available in the application. So we're really pushing that ownership down to those folks, the ESF folks that are actually reporting out on those metrics and letting them control the narrative of what's going up on the board as well, because it's their data, they're reporting out on it, and we're just aligning on the centralized source. So pretty cool application, mobile friendly as well. Our director got into it this weekend and was looking at some shelters that have popped up. So pretty cool. This one spawned out of the atmospheric rivers that we got deluged with back in 2023 in January. And really it was looking at, it started off as just kind of like, let's draw some boundaries of where we think there will be flooding and let's do some basic enrichments. We're using FME on the back end to kind of do all these. It turned into now we're actually getting modeling outputs from DWR and performing these intersects. And we were able to kind of go and help support Florida last year and take this dashboard and tailor it for Florida and get it up and running. And so I think that the nice thing about that, and kind of what I want to emphasize with all of these applications, is that we're willing to share the knowledge, the processing. Nothing's really nothing's secret on the back end, right? It's just taking different data sets and performing different spatial functions on them and displaying them to users. So this is one that we found a lot of success from. We do maintain a statewide evacuation inventory as best we can. There are 58 counties. There are other national parks that produce their own evacuation data. There's vendors that manage evacuation data for folks. And what we do is we try our best to pull all this together every 5 to 10 minutes, standardize on a schema, and give a statewide picture of active evacuations, whether they're orders or warnings in the state of California. This is kind of an application, older view showing the details of what we've acquired and what we're still trying to get. This has actually been updated more robustly, and I think we have like 40 something counties now out of the 58. So we're getting really close to full coverage. But managing statewide evacuation data is kind of robust, but we do find out that a lot of people are using it for all sorts of use cases. This is available. This application is linked here. You'll have the link but the actual data set underneath the hood is also available in the California State Geoportal. We push it up through there, and we're constantly maintaining it and keeping it up to date with the latest data. I think I jumped. Statewide power outages. Everyone always asks about power outages. Obviously, we want to get power on as fast as possible. We have a historic dashboard that we've kind of been keeping up and running, which pulls together a lot of the different utility companies' outage data. We also maintain a public safety power shutoff process where utility companies have to report in potential shutoffs due to wildfire risk, weather risk. So they push that data to us, and then we also display that internally. But this is more sustained outages as we go forward. And then we also have two aerial-borne platforms called FIRUS. We use them for initial attack. Originally, it was born out of Orange County for fire quick perimeter mapping and initial attack kind of intelligence. It's now for all hazards. We've used it for oil spills. We've used it for earthquakes. We have a SAR sensor on one and a LiDAR sensor on the other, and we're really exploring what we can do. But the big thing is just getting those perimeters shared down to our partners and to locals to be able to kind of plug into their modeling or give the incident commander a quick perimeter of what's happening on the ground right now so they can make operational decisions. This data is pushed out through a feature layer. There's also a Slack channel that you can subscribe to get the snapshot images and some of the quick 60-second videos that they also put out. Recovery operations, we use GIS pretty robustly. This was an application we kind of stood up just to kind of give a quick impacted parcels and cost estimate so we can help with some of our FMAG applications as well as our Presidential Disaster Declaration applications. We also manage a robust debris cleanup and removal process. I actually, before I worked here, I worked at Toxic Substances Control, and they handled phase 1 of the cleanup, which was household hazardous waste. So we had spun up a mobile application and a dashboard to allow them to kind of track that information and just kind of report out to the public what the status of their home is. This covers phase 2, so it's all the other processes that come after it, which is soil sampling, tree felling, chimney chipping, you name it. There's a lot of different processes and channels that go through as we're getting ready to clean up these parcels and get them back turned over to the county and back to the property owner so they can start rebuilding and get moved back home. And then we also work pretty hand in hand with CAL FIRE and their damage inspection process. They have a really robust boots on the ground DINS process to go in and look at every wildfire that I think they respond to, and even the Fed. I mean, it's pretty robust. They capture a lot of data now, but really it's that disaster kind of damage assessment on the ground, looking at what the damage is and taking pictures. And then actually our IA folks go structure by structure with FEMA when they're qualifying, and they use this application and they just kind of do a screen share and they walk through each structure to really meet those counts. And then this is a Tableau dashboard, but we wanted to kind of emphasize that, data is data. We use a lot of different technologies to do different things. And this is something we did to help out in Hawaii, where we're looking at social vulnerability index in those different areas. We do a lot of things in mitigation and grant funding too. We have a LISTOS program, which is a specific type of grant for folks that need a little bit more assistance. And so we use a dashboard just to quickly kind of show those results of where those grants are going, who's applying for them. And then we also have a hazard mitigation project tracker where folks are using this to actually go through all of our open hazard mitigation projects and do reviews and kind of update the data as they see fit. And collaboration, I think, is what I wanted to end with, which is, we've learned a lot from Kimberly, who's going to speak soon, about how Florida handles statewide GIS coordination during an incident down to the local level. And that's something we really want to emulate here in California. We have a weekly meeting that's standing for state agencies on 2:30 Pacific that we just have folks come. And a lot of times we cancel it because maybe there's nothing happening, but people love the meeting because they can come and hear kind of what's going on, hear the inside baseball talk about what potentially might be coming down the pipeline and how they might need to get involved in this future. The GIS professionals can come and ask those questions, kind of collaborate on data sets. And we're starting to open this meeting up to our local partners as well. The other thing that we're launching is we're launching a geospatial coordination hub that'll be a central landing page. During the LA fires, we found that a lot of data was flying around, and originally we're like, let's just slap a group on it. And then we're like, let's wrap a hub around that group. And we're like, well, let's not do it just for LA fires. Let's make it a standing, living place that everyone can go to and get the information that they always need. There's active incident information that's going to be on here. There's going to be some interagency data that you need to request access to gain access to. So hopefully folks can come and bring and share imagery and all sorts of other data sets that arise. During incidents, we spin up more frequent daily coordination calls. And the other thing we're leaning on Kimberly's knowledge of is like have a step page that's always there, and you don't have to worry about sending out a Teams link for getting the right people in the room when we have to do these quick coordination calls. Just put it here, put the PowerPoint with all the content here, and people can go and get the information. So this is launching soon. I'm really excited to announce that. And then really wanted to open up for, I guess we're not going to do questions, but if you have questions, you can feel free to email one of these fine folks here, and we can really connect with you on how we're using GIS. There's more technology that we're using, more applications that we're using, and this is only kind of a handful. But we're really willing to share all of our knowledge and our know-how about how we're doing this, and we're always willing to learn too. I know a lot of folks have better ideas or dealt with the same challenges that we do, and so really just wanted to open the door towards communication. So with that, thank you so much.
Thank you, Roger. I appreciate you emphasizing how you collaborate, and I do hope folks take you up on your offer for help. There's no reason to reinvent the wheel. I would encourage folks here today to reach out to our speakers for help if needed. I could use your, I was going to say your little trick, Zan, from earlier, but I see what you did. If there's anything that you saw today that you want help for, I would definitely encourage you all to reach out to those folks on this call today. That's the one thing that's amazing about GIS folks. We love to help and we love to share. So, so yes, we are actually over time, and we will probably go a little bit long. It's recorded, so if you have to jump, later on, that's fine. If you have questions, I would encourage you to add them to the Q&A, and then our speakers will try to answer them as we go about the session. If not, they will answer them at the end. So with that, I'm excited to introduce Eric Wilson, who is the GIS manager for NCDOT and has over 25 years experience in the GIS industry, maintaining roles from analyst to developer to manager. He has led NCDOT GIS unit for 4 years. Eric, I know you've had a really busy year, so I appreciate you taking the time to share what you've learned with us. So over to you.
Thanks, Terry. Some of the things that we're definitely engaging with now are the lessons learned from the past year. It's kind of what I want to share with you today, is just what we're going through right now in terms of ramping up for this season, and some of the things that are like practical approaches that we're taking based on an organization that generally hasn't been, what I would say critically aligned to supporting emergency operations, but we are learning to do so now. So this is sort of like our growing into the role. Previously, we had not been engaged to the level we are now, just because that was not necessarily a priority of where we were coming from in the past. So we're going to jump into that. How we're coordinating right now, in most response situations, we're coordinating with the folks you see here from the federal side. Some of the things that we've changed as far as the state goes is that we are coordinating through a group called NCW GEAR, which is our emergency response coordination team. North Carolina is a very vibrant GIS community, and we're very well blessed with a wide array of data. And so the state has elected to stand up this volunteer organization, which basically allows people during an event, whatever type of event it is, to stand up together through a unified team space, essentially, to share data and information about the emergency response work that's happening. A lot of that was in place last year during Hurricane Helene and the response we had there. And so that's something we have enhanced this year to have better coordination and communication amongst those different people, whether it's environmental quality or the DOT or whoever else it is that's involved in the event. We've also ramped up last year our engagement with some of the private engineering firms that we work with, which has been very encouraging. This is some people in the private sector. We've also been very engaged with the ESRI. They were very generous last year in their support of us during the event. We've continued to keep that going. We maintain the Advantage program out of NCDOT. I highly recommend that. It gives you a nice window in to their world and get some quick access to folks that you need from the engagement that we have with that particular vendor. And then the other thing that's really important to us this year is enforcing relationships internally within the DOT, both business units and divisions. As you know, most DOTs, their job is road construction. Basically, everybody in the DOT is kind of focused on, making roads new, wider, safer, things like that for the community. And the business that they do on a normal day is sort of interrupted when an event occurs, but then basically to build the roads back, they still go through the same process. So learning how to help them with the enhanced load and things like that has been some of the things that we've been definitely challenged with this past year. And that's what we're going to be continuing to coordinate on through the coming season. Internally, how we do coordinate during an event, we do this for every event that occurs. We stand up a SharePoint site. It's really that simple. It's one of the things that I think is a practical and easy solution that I would recommend. If you don't do this within an agency or an organization, I would do this. Having a simple landing page, internal, not exposed to the public, where you can put in information that helps your organization navigate the different data that's available to the internal folks of the organization. You can also have external links in here as well to help people get out. But some of the things that we've noticed is that, I think a lot of you know this, is that you kind of break an event down into like the approach of the storm, then the storm response in the immediate, and then the post-storm operations. That's how we have our internal dashboards organized. And a lot of the links you see here are either to dashboards or data sets that are critical to the agency and organization. We kept this list documented, and I'll show to you a little bit later how we did that, some of that. But we've enhanced some of the things that we're doing in the coming year to add more to what's going to show up on the next event dashboard that's in maintaining SharePoint, so we can get folks easy access to the different component and products that we have. Some of the things that we've stood up internally that we have to maintain, but we had to take a lot of notes about how to keep those things rolling, was an internal route map for DOTs or for smaller local organizations. A lot of times during an event, you've got to figure out how you can get resources around. And sometimes that's on roads that the public thinks are closed, but are open. And so we have to prepare a automated procedure to handle this inside of the event. We've also looked at how to make that better in the coming year. As we approach the season, we have a better handle on how to make this work based on some of that focus. So that's like a practical takeaway. It's like, hey, look at what you did in the last season, observe what didn't work and what did work, and then look to improve that process as you're moving into the new season. So we feel pretty confident about this product that we're able to develop this year based on some of our experiences out of the past. And like I was saying before, that's hooked into our internal page. We've also had some data sets we didn't even anticipate that we would need. So we have to have templates prepared for things like potential cell tower sites in areas of the state that we would put a temporary cell tower to enhance communications. We had to do this on the fly last year. We're hoping to not have to do that this year, but we'll have a data set ready to accept those features as they start to come available. We also have our damage survey, our damage response data, our damage survey that happens right after the storm passes, where we send out and we figure out how bad the damages are, has been revisited again this year. Usually we look at this as one of the things that we normally look at every year, but I would highly advise, like, if you have something such as a damage assessment application that captures a lot of data and you have a lot of pictures in it, definitely take a look at how you store that data and understand that in ArcGIS Online, there's not like a backup and recovery thing that comes off of ArcGIS Online. We had to actually put in place our own backstopping for that product, just as a warning. That's some of the things that we love ArcGIS Online. We love using Survey 123 and field maps and the things that it provides for us, but we also had to make sure that we had the data taken care of for the long term. And we did have some things that we had to look at as far as like ownership and data governance and things like that. So we've taken a look at that at this as we've gone through this year as well to prepare for the new season. I'd encourage you to do the same, especially when it comes to those field mapping type of things, because mobile apps are great until the data, becomes unavailable, for whatever reason. So we've also looked at how we dispense data to our users. We always have what's called a kitchen sink map during an event that we throw up, and it has like all the data inside of it. Well, as we were going through such a complicated event last year, we learned that, we wanted to provide a little more tailored experience to a few folks. And so we invested during the season in some demos and some prototyping of alternate options for folks to filter their data. One of the things that we realized that was very important is that inside of an event when you're trying to figure out what's actually happening on the ground, being able to filter by minute and by hour is very important, especially when you're getting multiple sources of imagery coming in. So we built a viewer that I think is a really great idea, where it has the ability to take the data that's coming in from different sources and look at the metadata behind it to add to a list, and then you can curate that data as you go and then filter it on and off basically with a time slider. So that's something that there's some out of the box tools that you can do that with, but we definitely had to write some custom code to do that. So you might look at something like that as well. When we look at coordinating externally, generally for us, we have what's called the Go NC portal through NCDOT, and we have an incident response area where we push all of our data out. Most things that people come to NCDOT for are the road closure data. But last year we also had this large event, Helene, and we had to actually cut off sections of the state where we told people not to go out west because it was that bad. And so we've prepared some templating data again this year that we'll put up if we need to, that will be able to perform that same function. But we had to perform this type of data creation inside of the event, and we don't want to go through that again. And so we've learned that we need to keep a polygon shape file with the correct amount of attributes in place, and then models that support that data as we go, because as an event matures, there are places where you can travel through that polygon, and so you have to have models that kind of, channel out areas where people can go, but areas we still want them to go. And then filtering that data, pushing that data over to cell phones and mobile devices so that people know they're entering into a geofenced area. We don't recommend them to go. We have all of that kind of configured for the coming year. So I'd also recommend looking at that as a possible option to control flow of people throughout a region. We also put together a humanitarian aid map. So we've kept track of all the sources that we used last time to make sure that we can push that back out if we need to. That was very helpful in the early stages of wanting to stage a lot of different types of resources, such as water or toiletries or things like that, that people could come pick up. They needed to know where to go. And we used a map of this type to get people oriented to where these different areas they could go to were. And one of the big things, like I mentioned before, are road closures with the DOT. And so one of the things that was interesting last year that we are going to keep in place this year is a road reopening dashboard. As much as you want to know the road closures that are happening, being able to convey like progress to the community, for someone referred to earlier as being morale, it is important to show how the progress is coming when you're recovering from an event. And so we've been tasked to provide not only the current road closures that are out there, but also how we're doing in response. And it is a really nice morale booster when you can see the numbers drop over time. This was a screenshot from a while back. So we had quite a few roads closed, but as we've gone along and things have improved, this has been a nice thing that we've been able to push out. But we had to prepare this in advance and then have to do all the mathematics and algorithm work to make sure that we could take the stuff that's kind of keyed up for current road closures and flip that script and say, okay, well, now those closures are opening. How does that reflect on the way forward? One of the things that we also did that I'd encourage you to do is figure out how you're going to document an event in advance. So one of the things that we've invested in at DOT is exploring the use of knowledge graphing, where you can basically look at, who's participating in the event and how those different pieces of your organization work together during the event, who the people are and the members of the organizations, the different applications that you're using, the platforms that you're riding on through those things in the event, and being able to build that out as the event is going. Have someone there to kind of document those relationships as you go, because things start to spring up, or you create applications and tools and people are interacting with those tools as you go. If you don't document that in such a way as you're proceeding through an event, you really can lose that intelligence. And so this type of documentation we've used on the backside to really extract out like how different people play together, how people could work together. So we have people here who are collaborating through the GIS unit who don't actually work together, but through the unit, they actually do touch some of the same data. Same kind of thing here. And then you can query that data later, much like you would query a SQL Server database. So it's a really an interesting way to do it, and something that I would encourage you guys to look at. Neo4j is the product that we use for some of this. ArcGIS Knowledge is another product that's out there that you could use to do that. So I encourage you guys to take a look at that too. Finally, it's the big lessons learned we've come away with. Baseline training is important. We definitely encourage all of our staff. We have a list of people, about 30 people who are available to participate during an event. We recommend they all take that baseline ICS training. We know that GIS is used a lot, and AGL is indispensable as the team supports it. So we spend a lot of time making sure that our folks know how to handle some of the basics within there. But related to that, you got to perform a skills evaluation on your staff. You just can't hop into an event not knowing who can do what. Some of the things that we learned over the past year that were really like baseline skills that some folks didn't know was like cartography and physical printing. For those of us who are older, printing a map isn't something that's foreign to us. But for a lot of the younger generations that are coming through, most of their products are like digital, like web maps or maps that are, I guess people are focused on like dashboards and arcade things and things like that. And those are awesome. And they really do service the majority of the requests. But in an event where you're trying to figure out what's going on, 9 times out of 10, people like to lay paper down on the table and scratch on it. And that requires people to understand how to print a map at scale and make sure labels and things like that work, and then be able to iterate on that product over time, how to print to a large format printer. Definitely recommend that you guys spend some time looking at that skill set that you have, especially with ArcGIS Pro. A lot of people have ArcGIS desktop experience, but pros come on, and also printing from other online tools. It's really important for those folks to know that. Same with cartography. It's one of those things that kind of gets overlooked, but it is important when you're making web maps that the product is readable. And then geocoding was a big one for us, where people who were getting addresses and they had to figure out how to do the geocoding work. Some folks who would volunteer to help, they weren't necessarily GIS native. They were people coming in who were bodies that we could utilize to do certain things. And if we were looking for some skills to make sure they had going in now, we would make sure that they had some of these things listed there. And then also from an IT perspective, because I work for the Department of Information Technology, not necessarily DOT direct, they call an optimized agency. So we serve the IT needs of DOT. From the IT perspective, I just encourage anybody in IT to look to reduce that friction in whatever way possible. If you can make somebody's life easier to keep their morale up, as we were talking about earlier, I totally agree with that. It's such an important thing to keep people positive. And the more friction you can reduce for someone to get their job done easier is definitely worth your investment of your time and suffering for there to have an easier path through so that they can get their work done that's serving the customer on the outside or the citizen or whoever it is. So definitely learned a lot about that and understood about how important that was. And then make sure you participate in those after action activities. That's been invaluable for us coming out of Hurricane Helene. A lot of our events are sort of minor events sometimes, and then we get one of these major ones, and we can be so overwhelmed with what's happened that we kind of forget to look back. And so you need to look back and see if your products and your people performed as you expected, and where the things didn't go really well, reflect back on those things and be critical of your groups and your team in a very kind and caring way, and just to highlight the things that folks could do to improve their skill sets or improve the products, so that you don't run into those things that are going to get you next time. So those are sort of the lessons learned, the things that we've encountered over the past year that we're focusing on. So yeah, thanks for listening. Hope it was useful.
Thank you, Eric. You all sure learned a lot, and how you innovated on the fly is really impressive. Thank you for sharing your lessons learned. Next, I'd like to introduce Kimberly Jackson, Florida's GIO. Following a year of field mapping in Australia's National Park System, Kim started her career in GIS at Florida's water management districts. After many hurricane seasons spent at the Florida EOC, she's happy to share lessons learned and leverage new ideas to support response and recovery across local and regional geospatial community. So over to you, Kim.
Thank you. Sound check. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
And can you see my first slide?
Also, yes.
Okay, terrific. Well, hello, everybody. I've been scratching down notes and screen capturing like crazy, just like all the rest of you, I'm sure. What a great group of people, and what a great time of year to be having these conversations. So today I'm going to share an overview of the Florida Geospatial Coordination Calls, which we started officially around 2021, and focus on some practical steps that you can take if you want to start coordination calls, or maybe just leverage some of the ideas, the tips and tricks we touch on today. I want to add that we're always interested in learning from you as well. Earlier, you heard Roger mention that some of the Cal OES staff were at the Florida EOC this past summer. They taught us about FME, and all the team over there now just doesn't know how they would live without it. So some really recent knowledge exchanges that have really boosted our power coming into this next season. So today I'm going to be focused on geospatial coordination calls for hurricane response and recovery, but the same activation occurs in response to things like wildfires, oil spills, tornadoes, floods, and sinkholes, and I'm sure some other local things that happen in your particular region. So what are these calls? Basically, they're joint hosted by the State Geographic Information Office and the Florida Division of Emergency Management's GIS team. Whenever I say I or we for the rest of this presentation, I'm really talking about Daniel Rydell and the team over at the Florida DEM and the State Geographic Information Office. They get kicked off when there's a level 1 activation, and most of the time they run 7 days a week. Every day they're from 1 to 1:30. We never deviate off that, and people know every day at 1 o'clock they can jump on those calls. We take the slides and all the chat content and we save that to a presentation that's stored on the GIO Hub site every day. We realize that not everybody's available at 1 o'clock every day, so they know that by 3 o'clock those presentations are posted with all the resources and references. It's strange for me to do a PowerPoint presentation on a Teams call talking about a Teams call. You may notice that the presentation graphics in today's presentation and the ones you may find on our hub site are very, very bare bones. I get a little nervous about that, and we get a little criticism about that. They're like, don't you? Yeah, we're trying to keep them really lightweight. We want to make them small and shareable. Our attendees can range anywhere from about 30 to about 400, and then we also have invited speakers. So the call started out really in a way to address phone calls we were getting. We would get people calling about imagery, and then you'd get 7 more calls. You know, the things that people call about. So we said, let's host a call, and that way we can share it out all at once. And originally, the calls were meant to address questions and needs. Where can I find this data set? How do I share that? Who do I call for this? And Daniel and I had a discussion this last hurricane season. We're like, I don't know if these are really worthwhile anymore because we're not getting as many questions as we used to. Nobody's coming with problems and questions. And when we sat back and thought about it a little bit, I think it's because of the left image there of the coordination part, right? So now we have geospatial open data portals. Now our federal partners have these wonderful outreach programs from the people that you've heard from today. And our local and regional coordinators in Florida Geospatial have matured so much that we kind of have the where's the data part of this figured out. And now it's just more specific to the event and coordinating. So here's an example of a regular agenda. They're very, very consistent. They don't change much. And we always make sure that we have time at the end for Q&A, because that still really is the heart and soul of this, giving people an opportunity to ask questions or look for information or share information. This is an example from the hub site. We have one of these pages for each of the events, and you can go in and click on these call references and it'll quickly download a PowerPoint for you. For the first time last summer, we decided to do pre-arrival resources because we know what people are looking for as they're watching that hurricane drift toward the state in the previous 72 hours. So we actually did a pre-arrival resource share out this time. The makeup of the attendees varies greatly depending on the location of the event, whether it's a highly urban place or a sparsely populated area. We get more attendees early in a hurricane season than we do at the end. You know, once everybody is sort of in lockstep and they remember where all the resources are and how all this works, the attendees tend to tail off a little bit. The one thing I'm really excited to report is that as our numbers grow for attendees on these calls, it's not just people looking for resources, it's people being willing to share their resources because they know about the calls, and so they join them as a way to get a lot of visibility in the state. NASA has been a standout partner over the last 2 years, and our sheriff's offices have really been rock stars as well. So how many people does it take if you want to do this or to pull these calls off? I would say about 3+. So you've got your Division of Emergency Management GIS staff. We've got the State Geographic Information Office. We need 1 AGO or hub developer to post everything and keep the content fresh. And then a network of geospatial speakers. And that's your invitation list for this meeting today, right? A lot of the folks you've heard from have been so gracious to share their time and their resources on our calls. the state GIO, you know, coming from the GIO's office, okay, I'm a little bit biased, but there are things that GIO can do for you that you shouldn't underestimate. We had, for the first time a couple years ago, helicopter video of a long, long stretch of beach in the southwest of the state. It was huge video files. And when I called our Azure contacts, they said, oh, well, you're the state GIO, yes. And you need it about how much storage? Yeah, for about how long? About 6 months. Oh, we'll do it for you for free. So things like that, you can potentially sometimes leverage that position or that visibility. They wanted to do it because they wanted to brag about it, and we said sure. So there is a lot of benefit sometimes to getting those kinds of agency folks involved. If I could provide one quick word of advice about the calls, they've spawned local calls. They've spawned local emergency response groups, the Southwest Coast, the Central, whatever. I think always reminding those stakeholders to identify one authoritative source of emergency response data and stick to it. We never, ever want someone wondering, oh, is that on the GIO hub site, or is that on the DEM site, or is that on the Regional Planning Council? No, everything we have on the hub site points to the Division of Emergency Management. We have presentations and we have resources, but all the data for emergency response is still stored at DEM. So it's only as good as what is there to do the analysis with. So data sharing in your off season is another tip and trick, I think. Providing some governance, providing some best practices for data sharing. We have that on our statewide geospatial open data portal, and we encourage people who talk to us about wanting to provide data or ingest data to look at these data sharing guidelines and make sure that in the off season, they're getting everything polished up and ready to go. Another thing we do on the calls is to highlight some of our more traditional data sets. LiDAR, Zan mentioned how you can go into the viewer at USGS and pull LiDAR. We also have local hill shades and some different variations of that LiDAR data, the DEMs derived from the LiDAR, talking about how these things might be helpful in addition to traditional sets like parcel data. Everybody knows what parcel data looks like, but do you know you can look at it by age, you can look at it by height, you can use your parcel data to figure out what's residential and what's educational. So encouraging people to sort of revisit and reacquaint themselves with some of these traditional data sets and think about how they could be used in emergency response. And then also being familiar with some of the products you've seen here before, the power outage maps, just knowing how they work and who to call and how to share them effectively. So best practices are another thing we touch on every single coordination call. We try to introduce people to colorblind and black and white symbology. We have a director of a very prominent agency in the state who is colorblind in every way possible, and making sure that he can understand our maps and our handouts and our analysis is really important. During Hurricane Michael in 2018, the sheriff's offices were putting printed maps on black and white copiers and making copies by the hundreds and thousands to hand out to the sheriff's office, and they only had black and white copiers. So all of those circles in 4 different beautiful shades of blue were of no use whatsoever. So we talk about how maybe put your map on a black and white copier and see whether it works or not. Full URLs for vision impaired screen readers. You may have noticed in some of my slides, I've got the whole URL printed out. That's so that the screen readers can get that reference rather than having an embedded link. Reminding everybody all the time, they get so sick of hearing me say it, I can hear their eyes rolling from the other side of the screen. Add a date, add a credit, please credit the stuff. How many of us have seen work that we've done and spent a lot of blood, sweat, and tears on in somebody else's presentation without a credit? You know, that doesn't sit real well. So credit photographs, credit the work, credit the maps. And please make sure you put a contact on every piece of content. Name your data, name your maps, name your folders by event, not just by year, because 90% into that hurricane season, you may think you're done, but there's going to be one more. And so making sure you've got correct naming conventions can be really helpful at the end. Let's be respectful of sharing images of people and their property. It's great to get a jarring image. I think it really gets leadership's attention, but behind that image is somebody's story, and we really want to stay respectful of that. And then sharing how-tos for common workflows, not just giving them the image, but maybe give them a quick handout, a PDF, a quick start guide of how to create a slider map in AGO with 2 temporally different images. That's something we know they're going to do with that data. So if we can make it easier and quicker for them, we can do that. And then we try to pick one of these best practices to highlight at each of the calls. So what's happened as a result? As you can imagine, we've gone from paper, like the previous speaker mentioned with those plotters, to field maps, to mobile applications, to dashboards. And then the next stage of it has really been the coordination calls. And this is a picture of the EOC. It's got the mention of the state geospatial coordination call on the big board. And that really was meaningful to Daniel and I to see that up as a significant part of response. Another really exciting thing that's happened is we're working with vendors. They reach out to us and they're like, hey, we've been hired to take helicopter video along the coast. Can we go ahead and embed your markers and some lat longs? Would that be helpful to you? Yeah, it'd be great. So that when you're flying along the coast looking at areas for beach impacts or other kinds of residential impacts, if the houses are gone, if the street signs are gone, if the roads are gone and the landmarks are gone, it's really wonderful to see those benchmarks in the video and to have this rolling lat long. So I think, educating our vendor community to leverage some of these things for value added has been something we're excited about. Last thing, 3 action items. Work together with your GIO. Reach out if you're not sure who your user is or can't find one. I can give you those names and numbers for your states. Emergency response GIS teams and the GIOs is just a natural marriage made in heaven. Publicize the calls at a regional user group and professional workshops. Heck, slap up a table and print a sign and say, how do you do emergency response GIS? And people will come to you and tell you what their bottlenecks are, what their successes have been, and how you can help. And then last but not least, we've started providing leadership with a summary. So this is from last summer. It kind of, I think, adds some gravitas to what's been accomplished. How many calls did we have? 18. Over 1,200 people participated, all 67 counties. Here's some new response partners. Hours of GIS staffing provided, members of an AGO shared emergency response group. How many people contributed satellite and aerial imagery? How many agencies or individuals? 14 plus. And here are some of them. Over 6,000 square miles of imagery collected, 215 miles of coastline videoed, and close to 500 million with a B hits on our Florida imagery in the Esri Living Atlas. So I think that makes leadership and management appreciate all the time and effort your teams are putting in. Herding cats. Is there room for improvement? Absolutely. And I think feeling like you've got to get everybody together, if you only have 3 agencies you're coordinating, you're going to do that. But when you have 23, naturally it's going to be a little more difficult, and we've got staff turnover. So that one person you used to call at that agency is no longer there. The new person doesn't know about your coordination calls, but I would just say this is always going to be a thing, right? You're never going to get rid of this, and don't let it stop you and don't let it demoralize you, because as Zan and I know Jeff, the next speaker, is going to talk, this is something Jeff taught us, is that, just being there, just having the calls, just having the dashboard, Roger's resources now that are available, the hub site he's going to wrap around all his information, just having that there is great. It lowers people's stress, it makes them feel involved, and it improves your success rate. So it doesn't have to be perfect. So last but not least, I would just encourage you to start and know that even small steps have really great benefits for your community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kimberly. We've attended your calls over the last few years, and they've been so incredibly helpful. And we really appreciate what you guys do in Florida, bringing everybody together. And I appreciate the time you spent sharing all those amazing lessons learned for the group. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
So next, someone who does not need an introduction, but I'll introduce him anyway. Jeff Barani currently serves as lead solution engineer on the public safety team for emergency management and disaster response. He's responsible for working closely with the community to discover, develop, and promote best practices in the use of ArcGIS to support the emergency management mission. Jeff also helps lead the ESRI Disaster Response Program, or DRP, which provides GIS support to organizations during disasters and crisis. So thank you all who's still hanging in there. I'm going to hand it over to you, Jeff.
Great. Well, thanks, Terry, and thanks everyone for sticking around in overtime here. I'll be quick, but a couple of key things that we wanted to cover, and there's a couple of updates that we'll share kind of from across the community that we wanted to make sure that you all were aware of coming into hurricane and disaster seasons here. So first of all, I just want to reemphasize and foot stomp to familiarize yourself with the FEMA Geospatial Resource Center. I don't know if you've noticed in Terry's mechanism here to present that all the links on the screen are clickable, so you can actually reach out and touch those today and get direct access. And obviously Terry and the team will send out stuff afterwards. But I think we've seen a lot of great models for collaboration, a lot of great models and examples of sharing information, and the FEMA hub site is just one of them. And know that there's more content that gets shared privately during events, and so that's a good thing to keep track of and work with your FEMA regional leadership as well as RGO to keep track of all of that. One key mechanism I think that's critically important that many folks talked about on today's call is the ability to facilitate secure information sharing with ArcGIS Online. I think we probably have lost sight of how valuable that is really within the community. It's a great thing that helps us share between various organizations. And so heading into disaster season, ask yourself, am I a member of the right groups? Like some of the things that have been talked about today. Should I set something up, more perhaps regionally or at a state level to help with all of these things? And remember, you can have people come in from your own organization, bring your own identity from other ArcGIS Online groups from across the community, and more we're seeing people use Hub Premium as a way to get folks in that may not have an existing set of credentials, in as a part of all of this. So again, just kind of emphasizing that as a best practice. Jared wanted me to say a few words about SARCOP. I think most of you are familiar with this. The Search and Rescue Common Operating Platform is a multi-agency platform designed to share information and intelligence throughout the entire kind of response cycle. But I think there's two critical points here that really for this audience. One is that obviously the search and rescue folks are going to get out there early on, and that can be a great source to start your damage assessment process. So if you're not connected with this group, we certainly encourage you to do so for that exact reason, and also think about how this can integrate with some of your existing programs and a lot of the work that you all do. It's really been amazing and inspiring to see the impact and the growth and the use of this technology and really community over the past 10 plus years and really grow. So know that's a resource, but just think about new ways that perhaps you can leverage that in some of your program work. Also, we wanted to note, photo mappers. So this is a joint effort between GIS Corps, NAPSG, and Cedar Digital. It's a great way to get situational awareness information, especially early on in an event. But normally it's FEMA that may activate this, but know that the group is open to others besides FEMA to activate photo mappers. So the emails down there at the bottom, again, you can click on any of these links or emails to get that going, but just kind of file that away. If there's maybe an event that happens in your jurisdiction that may not have the national response that's normally done, this is an additional resource that you can leverage. Continuing on in the public service announcement kind of perspective, the DHS GMO's office wanted to make make sure that Terry and I kind of shared with the community that the Highfield Open will be discontinued before the end of this fiscal year. So Highfield Open will no longer be available. There's still working on a variety of different ways to making sure that you all can access the data, whether that be on Highfield Secure or downloading that, now. In the post show notes, Terry will share some additional information on how DHS mission partners can get access to this, but we just wanted to raise your level of awareness that this is going away. We certainly have learned a lot from you all, over the years. And, John Petter and I were talking about, what do people need to do to prepare to receive help, right? Just in case, right? Whether you're getting, additional resources EMAC'd in or through intergovernmental agreements or contractors, what should you have documented? What's that piece of paper that you could hand someone when they're showing up for help to be productive for you right away? Because your hair's probably going to be on fire trying to do a million different things, dealing with the response. And, just some ideas here on the screen of things to start to think about, from a logistics perspective. Where do they park? Are they going to get fed? Do I need to bring a jacket because it's cold? From a people perspective, who am I reporting to? Who's in charge? What's the personalities that I need to know about? What's the process part? Who's going to approve and coordinate the work of the additional staff that are coming in? Where do they receive their tasking from? Is that from a fax or an email or a discussion? What's the mechanism for dealing with that? And then obviously the technology that goes along, with it. We've often seen when people get, leave, we're trying to do these org, scavenger hunts and seeing what's important, but what can you document beforehand that you could hand someone when they show in? What's the key data? What are the key apps? What are the key groups? And I tell you that for, anyone that, any EM, GIS person, it's actually going to be cathartic for you to go through this process and document it, because you'll be relieved to know that you've kind of got that thing in place that you can share when disaster strikes. Another thing that we wanted to mention this year that we thought was really important is to look at again who are and where are your vulnerable populations, and really from a state and local perspective, do that assessment on your own, and remind you of a couple of resources that are out there to help you with that process. There's the CDC Social Vulnerability Index. I think that might have gone away for a little bit, but it's back, so know that that's out there. There's a lot of great data on the Esri Living Atlas. If you look at the emergency response or at-risk links or groups, and again, you can click on that. There's like 15,000 geo-enrichment, variables that are there. So like we've seen people find valuable information that they didn't know exists, like, insurance coverage and like internet use and things like a number of households with dogs, because people won't evacuate without their pets and animals and all that. So I would encourage you to explore that and really, look at your community and know that those things are out there. And we've seen things like these infographic reports, with some of those key variables really resonate with the community over the past, little bit. We've tried to share a lot of things today with you to help you be better prepared. What are some of the things you can do kind of left of boom before something happens? But we also wanted to remind you of our disaster response program. If your capabilities are exceeded kind of right of boom after something happens, know that there's folks on the Esri side that are standing by to help in a variety of different areas. Get you additional software, like more named users if you don't have it. Help, some of our SEs helping you with short, workflow assistance types things, connect you to this amazing community of data that's out there like you've heard of today, or help you with tech support things. So, if there's something going on in your jurisdiction, a disaster or crisis, and you think there's something Esri can do, please don't hesitate to reach out. So a couple of things in closing. Christina already mentioned this already, but we have Glenn Russell, who's retiring this year. And Glenn's been absolutely amazing in terms of what he's done, and a huge, resource to the community for a number of different years. And I think we definitely want to honor and thank Glenn for all that he's, done. And so obviously you can say thank you, Glenn, was written here using the Landsat tools, and literally the Earth is thanking Glenn for his work. But I'd like to take just a minute, and read a message from Chris Vaughn, the former FEMA GIO who worked with Glenn for a long time, and just share a quick message honoring Glenn and his work in his retirement. So for over a decade, this is from Chris, for over a decade, I've had the privilege of working alongside Glenn through hundreds of disaster operations, such as Hurricanes Harvey, Irma, and Maria, as well as countless floods, tornadoes, and fires. In every incident, no matter the scale, no matter the complexity, Glenn was the calm at the center of the storm, a quiet professional with an unwavering mission-first mindset. Glenn has been the steady hand guiding FEMA's remote sensing efforts since 2013. What set Glenn apart was not his deep technical knowledge and operational expertise, shaped by his prior service in the Army and his support for NGA and the U.S. Coast Guard, but his relentless commitment to excellence. He worked tirelessly to meet every mission requirement, which were numerous during large disasters. Every stakeholder, whether it was federal, state, local, civilian, academic, he engaged with integrity, respect, and purpose. To say Glenn is a giant in our field is no overstatement. His leadership shaped the systems and practices that our community now relies on, whether they know it or not. As Glenn retires from federal service, he leaves behind a legacy of excellence, humility, and impact. I am forever grateful for his dedication, his friendship, and his mentorship. He will be deeply missed, but his influence will endure as the community continues to move this mission forward. So that was, again, from Chris Vaughn, and very well stated, and certainly on behalf of the GIS disaster response community. Glenn, we thank you for your service and wish you the best in retirement. So one last slide, and at least from me, and again, thanks for sticking with us. But I know, like, as we look out to the dawn of this year's hurricane and disaster seasons, like many of you, I have a sense of uncertainty and anxiety. But what gives me hope is all of you, the GIS disaster response community. We have witnessed all of you do amazing things over the recent years, and we are inspired by your passion, dedication, creativity, and impact. I'm confident that will be new people that will step up this year, and who knows who will be the next Glenn Russell or Paul Doherty or Kim Stevens or Martin Wason, or the people that you've seen, on the call today. So you all, this community, are a beacon of hope. Thanks for all you do, and let's hope for a safe and calm disaster season ahead. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Terry, to help close us out.
Thank you, Jeff, for that amazing PSA on what folks should do to prepare. And that was a really great message for Glenn, someone who really deserves all that and more. So I super quickly want to close us out. Thanks again to our speakers for the work that they and their agencies do to support this community. And thanks to you all for attending. Speaking of lessons learned, next year I think we need to allot 2 hours for this call. I hope you all can agree that there is just so much good work going on in the community. I appreciate getting to share all of that with you today. So keep an eye out for the recording of the materials. And of course, we ran out of time to get to the Q&A, so we'll work with our speakers to get those answered and posted after as well. So please remember, when you leave today, the folks on the call that you heard from, add them to your network. You can always reach out to us at NAPSG and we can connect you. So with that, thank you all again for your time today. Hope to see you all at the UC or future Prep Tech Talk. Take care.